Now, listen, I would never suggest that Canada should become Korea. But if the Canadian military is looking for suggestions on ways to get recruitment up, maybe maybe we should talk to Korea about their approach. Because I don't know why this would be effective, but it seems to be working. Let's maybe we should change our approach. After creating for YouTube for a while, something everyone inevitably learns is that if you put up enough stuff, someone will eventually find something to hate about what you do. And that's fine. I have discovered that most creators get caught in the trap of trying to be the smartest person in the room while completely disregarding that it's possible they are actually the dumb one and everyone else is correct. Believe it or not, you actually cannot think for yourself if you approach everything like you are the smart one. If you're the smart one, then you're probably wasting your time consuming any of that content. And I think that might be the root of why we see so much hate online. For instance, if you make a channel about building a birdhouse, people, and it gets big enough, people will say that, you're bad for the environment. And having your kids in a picture on Instagram or X or on a YouTube channel is, of course, exploitative if the channel is popular enough. That's actually a really, really big one for people to attack. If you have a wife or a girlfriend, you are, of course, an oppressive patriarch if you have enough fans. That's generally how it works. These things are all very dumb connections to make, but you will make them if you believe that you are incredibly smart and everyone would agree with you if they weren't so unforgivably stupid. And that line of thought makes me, of course, an incredibly horrible, lazy, arrogant person who weaponizes his own awareness of his own stupidity to degrade the opinion of those who are, in fact, smarter than me. And this is, of course, the single most horrible thing you can do to the internet ecosystem. Now, excuse me for getting ahead of the criticism. Just remember that when you hear it, they're all correct. This is because, as every Canadian knows, because we are particularly united in Canada with a unified culture and absolutely no conflict whatsoever. There are no sleeper cells from certain Middle Eastern countries with theocratic dictatorships who target synagogues. There are no biologically misunderstood people who require acknowledgement of their oppression. There's no confusion about who and what is actually causing this lack of conflict in our country, and that confusion is in no way makes us more than willing to scream at every shadow we perceive to be lurking around every corner, and we most definitely do not insist that the threat is real, no matter how quickly the problem disappears when we shine our enormous taxpayer funded halogen bulb upon it. Because you see, Canadian borders are in fact magical. I've said this many times and I'll say it again. Canadian borders are magical, and nothing bad ever makes it past them. Now, it is March 11th, 2026, and this, as you know, is the Comic Reporter. We don't do moral grandstanding on this channel. We're not here to offend you, although we might. It happens. Look, sometimes people open their mouths, and when they do, often, believe it or not, words come out. And when that happens, there is a risk of someone being offended. That is never the goal. Or sometimes it's the goal, but most of the time it's not the goal, but it can happen. Not that it's my problem, just fair warning that words exist on this channel, and if you're sensitive to those, you might want to cut out now. Anyways, that is my disclaimer. It is a trigger warning. You have been warned. So, about those synagogues in Toronto, I'm not entirely sure how you investigate that. Three synagogues shot up in Toronto by unknown assailants of a questionable origin. That's hard to investigate because where do you start? The guns won't be legal, so you can't track those. The people are part of a protected community, and it was done late at night. Everyone knows these guys. Everyone who knows these guys knows who they are and what they do. So going to police will feel like an existential threat to your safety. You'd basically have to catch them in the act, right? I mean, what are the chances that these people are Canadian citizens? What are the chances these knuckleheads went through the immigration system as card carrying Canadian hopefuls just looking for a better life and didn't slip through the cracks with the other 10% of immigrants that go undocumented and have to be tracked down months later by our super efficient Canadian intake system? Yes, one of them was driving a car, so if you are a law-abiding citizen, one might assume that at least one of these perfectly welcome and law-abiding members of our protected communities would have a driver's license. Well, it might surprise you to find out that people willing to shoot up a synagogue might also be willing to drive a car without a license, potentially. Maybe even with stolen plates. I know I'm blowing your mind here, but I mean, it's kind of true. Those who will commit drive-by assaults on inanimate objects with religious significance may, in fact, avoid having any sign of themselves existing within the country that they have immigrated to. See, what we have here is a protected minority on protected minority. See, what we have here is protected minority on protected minority violence. This makes this a little awkward. It's a little awkward for police to investigate this because no matter what they do, someone is going to call them racist. It really is a thankless job to investigate protected minority on protected minority violence, no matter who is responsible for the violence, because when you're looking for the motivation, you actually have to admit at some point that the motivation might actually be racism not committed by the majority, which is wild and completely unheard of, and also completely against everything I was taught growing up. I was under the impression that the only majority that I was under the impression that only the majority population was capable of conveying harm. So this is all very new to me, very, very new. I am shocked, wildly shocked that there are people other than those who are born in Canada that are capable of causing problems for virtually anyone. This is a wild revelation. I was under the impression that every person who came to Canada who didn't look like me was an infant who had no agenda, who what that didn't look like me was an infant who had no agency and would simply do whatever they were told because Canada was clearly an oppressive nation that held people down like dogs unless strict measures were taken to stop the general population from causing immense damage with the valid criticisms that they had. That's wild stuff, man. I'll see. It's wild stuff, man. It really is wild stuff, man. I'll need a minute to process this. What we have here, folks, is what we call a glitch in the matrix. And honestly, I'm so glad this stuff is happening now. Not the shootings and the death and all that stuff. That's bad. It's clearly bad. I mean, I'm glad that it's getting clearer and clearer that if you just take whatever another country sends you, they will understandably also send you the people they don't want to deal with. I can't think of a better way to make your worst problem someone else's problem than to find a country that doesn't filter the problems before they cross the border. And I mean, just emigrate your problems to that country. Because I'll be honest, that's what this. Because I'll be honest, it looks like that's what happened. And I'll tell you what, I admire the hustle. I really, the Middle East has game, man. They know how to take care of their problems, and I salute their diligence. Now, bear with me. I have to be very careful with my words now that the Liberals have decided to not talk about Bill C9. C9 is the Combating Hate Act. No one really knows what it is or why it's important or how it'll be used, but I'm assured that all radicalism is driven by benign comments on the internet, and those comments are not, in fact, an excuse to point the finger back at the evil majority and escape accountability for what is left of the church that you just burned down. I'm actually kind of excited about C9. If there's one thing Canada needed, it's more things to call hate crimes. Way more. Threatening people with your pronouns or suggesting that perhaps we should dig up some rock to help the economy or parking a truck in downtown Ottawa was clearly not generating enough hate inside this country. We need way more things to charge people with because we have 343 lawyers in charge all over the country. And you can never have enough work for our elective And you can never have enough work for our elected officials to avoid doing. The good news is that C9 is expected to prevent a three-way holy war in Canada, so that's a good thing. The Combating Hate Act should instead make it a two-sided war, with the Christians sitting this one out. Good luck to you other two. We will honor your minority status and just let you take care of each other as nature intended. At some point, I'm going to talk about activists and how big of a failure in life you have to be an expert on nothing except what other people should lose access to. Activists actually don't matter. I don't care. They don't matter. They've delegitimized themselves. They have no power, no protection. They're weird. They are weird beyond your wildest dreams. And in a just world, they'd all be in the asylum they were released from in the 80s, turning big rocks into little rocks. And finally, let's talk about that Mark Carney speech. I have never seen such bad faith interpretations on both sides. I had to watch it myself to believe it. I think I'm at the point where I'm just done with Canadian media and government altogether. Blind MPs, dumb reporters, just genuinely bad people across the board, manufacturing anger and hate at a rate everyone thought impossible. But boy, did these people ever prove us wrong. Wow. They are impressive in their disdain for their voters and viewership. That's crazy. So it's time for critical thinking to enter the chat. This is the dangerous part of the uh, video, super dangerous. Let's just actually look at Mark Carney's speech about Iran and see if I can use perfectly legitimate and logical arguments to remind people that my brain isn't actually property of Canada or the YouTube algorithm.
So, you mentioned the rupture world. Yes, the world order, in our view, is undergoing a rupture.
Yep.
And the old norms of the rules-based international order are being erased, and that new system that will emerge ultimately is yet to be built.
I think the order is already built. It was already built a long time ago. There's just some people who took a while to admit that the things might have changed a little bit in the past 20 years or so.
Global institutions have often been too slow to react to crises and too ineffective when they did.
What he means is that the global institutions are too concerned with the world and being looked at as kind and nice and worldly and good and moral when even when the reaction called for something you might be preferred to call immoral, because sometimes what people think is moral is not the right approach. I know. I know it sucks, but it's true.
And this breakdown has been building over time. Over the past few decades, a series of crises, beginning in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics, have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration.
This is, of course, Mark Carney admitting that COVID was a lie, or maybe a bit of an overreaction. It's kind of wild to hear him admit to these things, even if he's doing so covertly.
But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, and supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.
So that specific line, for anyone who's saying that Carney is afraid of Donald Trump, I present to you proof that that's probably not true.
And this is the point I was trying to make, in Davos, countries cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes their source of subordination.
Forced subordination. Using economics to force subordination. Yeah, indentured servitude. Probably not good.
Geostrategically, hegemons are increasingly acting without constraint or respect for international norms or laws, while others bear the consequences.
Again, I ask you, is Mark Carney afraid of the United States? Because the hegemony he's talking about is the US. He could also be talking about Russia or China, which ultimately he is. But primarily the one he's focusing on here is the United States. That doesn't sound like fear to me.
Canada's position on the developments in the Middle East remains clear.
Yep.
The Islamic Republic of Iran is the principal source of instability and terror throughout the Middle East.
Mhm.
It has one of the world's worst human rights records and must never be allowed to obtain or develop nuclear weapons.
I mean, that seems pretty reasonable, right? Iran must never be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. He didn't say they had one. He said they can't be allowed to have one. All right. Now that we have that out of the way, let's continue.
Canada and our international partners have called consistently upon the Iranian regime to end its nuclear program, including at the G7 summit in Kananaskis and with the United Nations reimposition of sanctions this past September. We've sanctioned over 250 Iranian entities. We've listed the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as a terrorist entity.
Right. And that because listing people as terrorist entities and sanctioning them is so effective at getting them to stop doing the things they see as beneficial to their own power. Yeah, that this is 100% effective. And we'll get to him admitting that later on.
And despite numerous diplomatic efforts, Iran has neither fully dismantled its nuclear program, halted all enrichment activities, nor ended its support for regional terrorist proxy groups.
Right.
Canada stands with the Iranian people in their long and courageous struggle against this oppressive regime.
We sure do. We sure do. Because we're afraid we might have to do it here eventually. We're with you.
And we reaffirm Israel's right to defend itself. Canada supports the United States.
Which is the thing most people have a problem with. It's almost like people don't understand that you can fire this first missile and still not be the aggressor. Yeah, that's might be how international law defines you, but international law is fake. It's a myth. It doesn't exist. But if a bully gets in your face and starts trying to push you around using words, you can punch him in the face. It's okay. That's self-defense. We should probably address that.
Acting to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon and to prevent its regime from further threatening international peace and security.
Mhm.
And the Canadian government urges the protection of all civilians in this conflict.
Now, if that doesn't make you mad, I'm sorry. I really don't know how to do it any better. Just about everything I said here is disagreed with by our mainstream and independent media. And quite frankly, if it's not unique enough for activists to try to remind me that I need to be a good boy and just go with the crowd, I don't know how else to put it. The problem with this speech wasn't the mealy-mouthed hypocrisy that most creators think existed here. The problem with this speech is that it wasn't made with AI or dumbed down for a general audience. The reason the liberal media got mad is because Carney didn't play the word games. He didn't say what he was expected to say. He didn't cater to the left. And that makes the media mad. It does. It makes the media mad because it shatters that little black box they like to use to frame their leaders for their readership and audience. They need that box to exist to dumb the content down enough so that the people that read them remain stupid. Mark Carney isn't binary. And if a leader isn't binary, it requires nuance to make sense of what they do and say. And that is not a skill most writers or creators in any space are really capable of. And they never actually were. It's far too much work. And if you are capable of holding two thoughts or more in your head at the same time, you're clearly a foreign actor who is getting paid by whichever group is the boogeyman on that given day. So when Carney comes out and said, I believe in the rules, but I understand that there are some enemies where the rules have to be bent, that throws the purists into a tailspin. This is an admission by Carney that I knew was coming, and most other people knew had to come. But for those who need him to be one specific thing and believe one specific line of thought, yeah, this is going to break their brains, not because they're stupid, but because they're paid to keep their audiences stupid. That's how it works. Sorry. Yeah, your favorite commentator's job is to keep you stupid. A politician's job is to not get brutally destroyed by their voting base. And if you understand that, then you also understand Zoran Mamdani's reaction to the attacks in New York.
Was held outside Gracie Mansion,
Yep.
where I live with my wife Rama. Neither of us were home at the time.
Okay.
This was a vile protest rooted in white supremacy entitled.
Remember that he said that because we're going to loop back to it. This is that comment was directed at his voter base, but he doesn't believe it, and we'll prove it with his own speech.
It'll stop the Islamic takeover of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
I'm the first Muslim mayor of our city.
Mm-hmm.
Anti-Muslim bigotry is nothing new to me, nor is it anything new for the 1 million or so Muslim New Yorkers who know this city as our home.
Well, then we have something in common because, I mean, believe it or not, bigotry is not restricted to Muslims. It's not. I'm sorry to break that to people, but majority gets his fair share.
While I found this protest appalling, I will not waver in my belief that it should be allowed to happen. Ours is a free society.
Now, remember that that's why he called it a white supremacist rooted movement, right? There's nothing bigoted about white supremacists, and they should also be allowed to speak, but the double talk is crazy. It's crazy. But also remember, this is a politician. His voter base is rooted in something other than, New York.
Where the right to peaceful protest is sacred. It does not belong only to those we agree with. It belongs to everyone. I will defend that right every day that I am mayor, even when those protesting say things that I abhor. Let me also be clear about something else. New York City will never tolerate violence.
It's weird that he says that because New York City was kind of built its reputation on violence, right? That seems to be the history.
Whether from protests or counter-protests. Many of the counter-protesters met this display of bigotry peacefully, with a vision of a city that is welcoming to all. But a few did not. Two men, Amir Balat and Ibrahim Qayyumi, traveled from Pennsylvania and attempted to bring violence to New York City. They are suspected of coming here to commit an act of terrorism. There is video of these two individuals throwing two devices towards the protest. The police department has determined that these were improvised explosive devices made to injure, maim, or worse.
So what's wild about this, of course, is that the white supremacist-rooted peaceful protest was attacked by a not so peaceful counter protest, and this is very unfortunate. This what's happening to Zoran right here is what happens when you realize that somebody crossed the line and you can't defend it. So you attack the people who were peaceful, and then you say, but also a small part of the counter protest that I agree with may have gone a little too far. That way you don't alienate your voter base, but you also villainize the people who were probably most accurate and whose lives were actually put in jeopardy by your voter base. That's how you do that. It's clever. I mean, it's completely transparent, but it's kind of clever.
Thanks to the swift and decisive actions of NYPD officers at the scene, both men were immediately taken into custody, and the devices they brought taken off of our streets. I want to commend the officers who were on site. They faced a chaotic situation that very quickly could have become far more dangerous.
And I would like to commend Mayor Mamdani on being able to recognize when portions of his community get a little out of control. So, I mean, credit where credit's due. Yeah, so obviously the rallies in New York weren't white supremacists driven by an existential hatred of any particular group or religion. That's dumb. And I think he obviously knows that because Aram Mamdani also isn't dumb. I mean, if it was, he would never have gotten elected, nor would he be able to walk the streets without fear. The cops wouldn't pray with him. There would be groups of hooded people or a certain ethnicity patrolling the streets at night. The city would be on fire, and just none of that is happening. What Mamdani did here is make sure that his voter base doesn't try to take him out themselves, because that's how it works. Politicians preserve themselves first. He's not on his voter's side. He's just making sure they think he'll protect them, no matter how blatantly he has to lie to maintain that support that got him elected. So we see this in Canada too, by the way, with all the floor crossings over to the Liberals from both the Conservative and NDP governments, and the incredible amount of surprise and pearl clutching that goes on when people start to figure out that politicians are not, in fact, married to their chosen tie color. Shockingly, the only ones really married to the red, blue, or orange tie that politician rode into political relevance is, in fact, the voter themselves. This might be why it's best to know something about the person you're voting for and not necessarily the party or leader that they represent. But what I do know is that I'm just an idiot on the internet. Luckily for you, I'm not your favorite commentator or a politician, and no matter how stupid these people make my Luckily for you, I'm not your favorite commentator or a politician, and no matter how stupid these people make my viewers, I can always make myself stupider. The viewer is always the smart one on this channel. That is my gift to anyone who watches me. If you watch me, you'll never be the stupidest person in the room. If you got a doctorate, all I did was graduate. If you graduated, I dropped out in grade 9. If you dropped out in grade 9, I failed grade 2. And if you failed out in grade 2, don't worry, I can't read. That's how it works. I'm dumber than you, and there is no way you can go lower than I can. You're welcome. And if you think you hate a lot of people, I tell you what, you got nothing on this guy. I hate poor people. I hate gay people, black people. There isn't a single gender out there I don't hold a mountain of disdain for. And if you hate your province, don't worry. I hate your province more than you do. When you say that stuff, I'm just making sure you know you're right. And that's because you're smarter than me and you know exactly what I think and you know my motivation better than I do. And I thank you for that. That's how things work here. And that's because I make $7,000 per video and I'm paid by Israel, Russia, Iran, Ukraine, China, America, and Canada. And not one of the words that comes out of my mouth is genuinely my opinion. There, I said it. You got me. Oops. I am on every page of the Epstein files and totally believe your children should transition or not transition based entirely on being contrarian to what you believe. The point is that I can't make you think critically, but that doesn't mean I can't think critically. And thinking critically requires me treating myself like I'm stupid. Anyway, enough. Anyways, thanks for signing up. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for subscribing and liking the video and for paying attention to the comic reporter. I'll try to be back within a week this time. Take care.